Welcome to Joy. Glad that you could join us this morning. As we mentioned, there's a lot of activities and events coming up, so hope that you'll be a part of it. The canoeing and the picnic and going to Three Cedars, and then Hallelujah Harvest, our big outreach event that's going to be coming up in October. So pray that you'll be a part of it. Pray and see how you can play a role in that as well. This morning, we are going to be talking about a blueprint for discipleship. Now, at our church, we do talk about discipleship a lot. Maybe you've heard it before. Sometimes it's in the bulletin or it gets announced from up front about that it's something you can be involved in. We give out some certificates for people who have completed certain programs in it every now and then. And maybe you are not quite sure what exactly it means or what we're doing with that. At our particular church, we have a program that we go through. There's a class where you meet with someone one-on-one to learn about the Bible and what it means to be a Christian and what it means to follow God in your life and different things like that. That is for anyone. It doesn't matter whether you've been just accepted God in your life or you've been a Christian for years and years. But then there's also other classes that are out you can take if you choose to and learn how to go and work with someone, how to teach someone and go through those lessons with someone, and even a leadership training we call it. And there's several things that we do. Now, our way is not the only way. It's not the only way you have to do discipleship or anything like that. It's just what our church has found that works well for us, and so we do that. But we kind of have to answer, what is discipleship? And so if we just really boil it down to its most basic meaning, what does that mean? It's just following the teachings or the philosophy of someone or something. Now, the best way to understand it is something that probably most of us do understand really well, and in fact, some of us might have even partaken in before, is think of it like an apprenticeship or an internship or something like that. You have at a job. Okay? Many of us probably went through different things like that, where you follow someone around, you learn from them, they teach you how the job works, what kinds of things you're supposed to do and not do, the best practices to follow, what's going to help you out, all kinds of stuff like that. So that eventually, when you get to be on your own, you already have a solid foundation that you're standing on for that job, so you can go forward and that you can do a good job with whatever that profession is. You've learned about it from someone who has a lot of experience and who's gone through a lot of stuff, and so you can take their lessons and apply them in your life and going forward to do well with it. And that's basically what discipleship is. But when we're talking about it from a biblical and a godly perspective, what is discipleship and the way that it's often used? Discipleship is conforming your life to look more and more like Jesus, and then helping other people to do the same thing. And when you're trying to wonder, what is discipleship? What do we mean when we talk about discipleship all the time? That's really what we mean, what we're talking about. Trying to get yourself to look more like Jesus, more and more, a process continually, and trying to help other people around you to go that same direction as well. So how can we do that? Like I said, there's a lot of ways you can do it. Our church has a process we like to use. Again, it's not the only way you have to use. How do you do it? Well, in John 1, the passage that Stephen read for us a few minutes ago, gives us what I think is a good blueprint to follow, to kind of get an idea of what this means. And so often in the Bible, we are reading and maybe we're going through it a little fast, and we go past these things that happen, these accounts or stories that are in the Bible, and maybe we don't always see what is really going on. And maybe this is an account that might be easy to go past. It's talking about just a couple people who hear Jesus. And sometimes it's easy to go past these kinds of things. But what we need to remember is that what's in the Bible, God has it there for a reason. God inspired people and inspired His Word and kept it for us and protect us, and everything in there we can learn from. So even this story, while it might be one that's easy to go right past and not notice and not think a second thought about, it's important, and I think it gives us a good blueprint that we can follow as we're trying to figure out what does discipleship look in our lives. So we're going to go back through this account in John 1. I know Stephen read it once. We're going to work our way through it again this morning as we go through this. So we're going to read a few verses at a time. We're going to start in verse 35. It says, "Again, the next day after John stood and two of his disciples, and looking upon Jesus as he walked, he saith, Behold, the Lamb of God. And the two disciples heard him speak, and they followed Jesus. Then Jesus turned and saw them following, and saith unto them, What seek ye? They said unto him, Rabbi, which is to say, being interpreted, Master, where dwellest thou? He saith unto them, Come and see. They came and saw where he dwelt, and abode with him that day, for it was about the 10th hour. So the first thing that we see here is that these disciples listened. They listened to Jesus. So it says, mentions John here, and this is John the Baptist. John who was preparing the way for Jesus, trying to tell people about Jesus, and this is someone, he's coming, it's important, you should listen to this guy when he shows up. And so John has some disciples, some people who are following him and listening to him and trying to learn from him and listen to the teachings that he's giving. And it tells us about two disciples in particular, and they had been following John. And then Jesus comes by, and John says, Hey, behold, the Lamb of God. This is the one I've been talking to. This is who you need to listen to. This is who you need to be following. And so those two disciples, they have a choice that they have to make at that point. See, they have been following John, like we said. Presumably, things have probably been going well for them. They're learning from John and listening to him. They like his teachings, or else they probably wouldn't be following him. And then this other guy, Jesus, comes by. And now they have to decide, am I going to stick with what I've been doing, or am I going to follow Jesus and see what this guy is trying to say? And so they make the choice to listen to Jesus. They say, okay, I'm going to stop and I'm going to listen to what this guy has to say. They could have said, okay, I'm pretty good with John over here. I like the things he's telling me. I like what I'm learning. I like the person I'm becoming over here. I'm going to stick with John. They had that choice. Instead, they make the choice, I'm going to listen to this other guy, Jesus, and see what he has to say. And we have to make that choice as well. Now, we first make that choice if we decide we are going to accept God, Jesus, into our life. That we're going to put our faith and our trust in him. That we want to be with Jesus. That we want to go with him. That we're going to trust him to help us through this life. That's a choice that we have to make. We have to choose to turn from what we've been doing and turn to Jesus. But even after that, we have to make the choice. Are we going to continue to listen to Jesus throughout our life? That's a choice we have to continually make. We have to keep deciding, am I going to stick with Jesus, or am I going to turn away to my own thing? Just as these disciples had to decide, am I going to stick with John? I'm going to stick with what I'm already doing, or am I going to turn to Jesus? We have to make that choice as well. Because it's really easy for us to just stay where we're already at. We get real comfortable and settled in places where we're at in life, and we don't like to make changes often. There are some of us that are all about change and always want to change everything about in our life, but for a lot of us, we like to get nice and settled and comfortable and find a good spot for us that we can stay in. And we don't like to change and move out of that very often. And if you are going to have Jesus in your life, have God in your life, there's going to be times he's going to be guiding you in different directions. And sometimes that's going to be in a different direction than what you've already been doing. And you're going to have to make the choice. Am I going to listen to Jesus? Am I going to go with him here? Or am I going to stick with where I'm at? Just as these two disciples had this choice. Am I going to stick with John? I'm comfortable with John. I like him. Or am I going to go with Jesus? And we have to make the decision in our life. What are we going to do with Jesus in our life? Even after you accept him into your life, you still have to make that decision. What am I going to do with Jesus? Am I going to keep listening to him, or did I just want him in my life to make sure that I don't have to go to hell or something like that? Am I just happy to know that, hey, I prayed that prayer and it's all good now? Or are you deciding, I'm going to listen to him and I'm going to stick with him, and even when he sends me in a different direction, I'm going to stick right there with him? But there's one other thing I want to point out about this. It wasn't until after those two disciples listened and showed some interest in what Jesus was saying that Jesus reached out to them with an invitation. Once they were listening and they turned to Jesus and they start listening to what he has to say, that Jesus says to them, hey, what are you looking for? What do you need? What is it that you want right now? Jesus reached out to them after they showed some interest in him. Now, I don't want to mislead you or get you confused about anything, because Jesus is always with us. Jesus has not left us. He's not turned away from us or abandoned us or anything like that. Jesus tells us he's going to always be with us. But what happens is Jesus allows us a choice. And because Jesus loves us and because Jesus wants to have a relationship with us, he offers us that choice. See, if Jesus forced us into a relationship with him, forced us to love him, that is not much of a loving relationship, is it? That's forcing you into that relationship. Instead, Jesus loves us and he offers us a choice. And so we have to make the choice, just as these two disciples did. Am I going to listen to Jesus? Am I going to go with him or not? And we constantly have to choose that. Jesus doesn't go anywhere. Jesus stays right where he's at. And sometimes we move away from him and we have to come back from him. See, he's always there ready for us when we turn to him. When we make the choice to turn to him and go with him and listen to him, he's right there waiting for him, just as he was ready for those two disciples of John. And as soon as they turned to him, he reached out to them and said, hey, what do you need? So when we turn to him in our life, when we're ready to listen to him, when we make that choice to go with him, he's right there willing and ready to give us the invitation to come along with him. And so after that, those two disciples are given another choice. So in verse 38, we're going to start there, and it says, Then Jesus turned and saw them following, saith unto them, What seek ye? They said unto him, Rabbi, which is to say, being interpreted, Master, where dwellest thou? He saith unto them, Come and see. They came and saw where he dwelt, and abode with him that day, for it was about the 10th hour. So they listened to Jesus, and now they have to make the choice, am I going to follow Jesus? First they listened. They said, yes, this is someone I want to be with. Now they made the choice, I'm going to follow him as well. Jesus offered them the invitation, and now they have to make a commitment. Am I going to commit with this Jesus guy? Am I going to go with him and start down this path? Or am I going to stay with what I already know and what I'm already comfortable with John? Jesus asked them what they were looking for. And so they're at that point, and they have a choice to say. They could say, well, I don't know, and then just kind of wander away instead. And then they didn't really have to make that commitment. They just kind of can play both sides that way. Well, I'm still kind of with John, but I kind of like what you're saying. I don't know what I'm really looking for. I'm just trying to feel things out. But instead, they make a choice to commit and go with Jesus. And Jesus says, what are you looking for? And they're like, hey, Jesus, where are you staying? Where are you going? What are you doing? Where can I go with you? I want to go where you're going. Jesus, let's go together. So they didn't just follow him just to pop in for a few minutes to say hi and then move on back to where they were or go on to the next thing or anything like that. It says they went with him and they stayed with him for the entire day. They wanted to stay there. They wanted to commit and see what Jesus was doing and where he was taking them. And they wanted to follow him. They listened to him. They liked what they were hearing. And then they made the choice, I'm going to follow this guy. So not only do we have to make that choice in our life, yeah, I'm going to continue to listen to Jesus. I'm going to stick with him. But then, not only that, I'm going to actually move with him. As we said, Jesus doesn't move. Jesus is there waiting for us, ready for us. And then when we start moving, we move with him. Often we feel like Jesus has kind of left us behind, but really it's because we've moved away or we've let too much stuff get in between them. Instead, we need to be right there with them, following along with them so we can stick with Jesus. So for them, it wasn't back and forth. I'm going to spend some time with John. I'm going to spend some time with Jesus. I don't know what I'm going to do. Jesus was calling them to commit, to follow him, to stick with him. And often we like to kind of walk that little tightrope too. We like to be back and forth. We don't like to commit, whether it's with God or even with a lot of other things in life, don't we? We don't want to commit too hard. You don't want to let someone else down. You don't want to say, well, I'm not sure if I can be there or not. Maybe I'll make it. Anything like that. We like to play both sides a lot. And we do it with God as well. But when we look at what the Bible teaches, what we see in here, it's consistent. That it says, hey, you can't go back and forth. You can't do the tightrope thing. You can't walk the fence. If you're going to commit to Jesus, you need to commit all the way. In Revelation, it talks about that Jesus says that he wants you to be hot or cold. That either be all with me or just don't even try. He says, I hate when people are lukewarm, he calls it, in the middle, trying to walk that tightrope back and forth. Either be with Jesus or don't. Don't go halfway back and forth. In 1 John, it talks about light and darkness. It gives us that example. The light and darkness, they can't be together. It's either light or it's dark. One or the other. Can't be light and at the same time that it's dark. And so you can't be both. You can't be with Jesus and then not with Jesus. So you got to pick one or the other. In Romans, it tells us we shouldn't be ashamed of the gospel of Christ. We shouldn't be ashamed of Jesus in our life. We shouldn't be worried or trying to hide it or only let it out sometimes. That we need to commit. Are we going to go with Jesus or not? And if we're going to follow him, he wants us to follow him all the way. He doesn't, not this thing that too often people do where, you're a Christian only on Sunday kind of thing, where when you come to church, you'll sing the songs and you'll sit and listen as we open the Bible together and you'll hold your Bible and everything else. But then as soon as you leave the church the rest of the week, you're doing whatever else you want to do. That is not what God is calling us to. And in fact, when we do that, it often turns people away from God. And it damages their chances of coming to God. Because now they see you and they say, okay, well, that person goes to church. That person says they're Christian, but you know what? Really, most of the time, they're doing a lot worse things than I do. Well, I don't need God in my life if that's how it's going to be for me. And so that turns people away from God. And so God is calling us, hey, go all the way. You're not just a Christian just sometimes. You're either going to be with me or all the time or you're not. And that means that sometimes we're going to be a little bit different than what the world thinks we should be doing. But that's okay. We should be, because we're not of the world anymore if you have God in your life. It says now you're in God's family. It says that we need to be the light that is shining to the darkness around us. And in Michigan here, we're blessed to have all those Great Lakes all around us, don't we? And if you ever go on vacation and you go to those coasts, what do you see a lot of times on those coasts? Those lighthouses. And what's a lighthouse do? It shines out in the darkness of the water, those Great Lakes, or even out in the ocean or anything like that in other places. And it shines out in the darkness to tell them, hey, be careful, and to help them guide themselves in to a safe harbor. So when we have Jesus in our life, when we're following him, we are to be those lighthouses in the darkness of the world around us. That we need to be shining God's light out to those that are around us and telling them, hey, come to the light. Come in here. God offers you a safe harbor. Let me help you find it, and let's get in there, and so that you can get into the light as well. So they've listened to Jesus, and they've now made a choice to follow him. But what do they do with it after that? So look down in verse 40 now. It It says, one of the two which heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first findeth his own brother Simon, and saith unto him, we have found the Messiah, which is being interpreted, the Christ. So after they make that choice to follow Jesus, and they spend the day with him, and they've gone with him. Now, it says they go out and they tell others about it. That the next thing they want to do is go out and tell people. And it's at this point we're told that one of these two disciples that we've been talking about, his name is Andrew. And it says Andrew goes out and he finds his brother Simon. Now, we know Simon better by the name Peter. And Andrew goes out to his brother Peter and to tell him about Jesus. And he finds his brother, and Andrew's just so blown away by what he's heard that he has to go find his brother. It's like, hey, Peter, you got to listen to this. Listen to what I heard from this Jesus guy. Listen to the things he was telling me. This is amazing. You got to listen to what he's saying. And he says, look, this is the Messiah, the one that we've been looking for, the one that the Old Testament's been telling us is going to come. I found him. This is it. And he runs out and he tells his brother, and he wants to tell other people about it. And so a lot of times, we are really eager to share things with people, but not so eager to share about Jesus. Something really good happens to us. We want to go tell someone about it. Reach out to someone in some way and let them know so that you can kind of celebrate with them. Tell them all the good things that are happening in your life, or the good things that, something that happened to you, that happened to your kids, or whatever. You want to reach out with these good things that are happening. Or even when there's something, hard times that you're going through, or bad times, you might reach out to someone to tell them about it and hope that they can help you through it. On social media, you're on social media, sometimes we're pretty willing to share stuff on that too, aren't we? Sometimes too much. And maybe if you've been on there, then you probably all know someone who you look at and be like, well, they share way too much than they should be on here. Because we're really eager to share stuff sometimes. Yesterday, I was on my phone, and I saw this video about a funny situation that happened at a church camp. And so right away, I was like, I got to send this to all the kids that was in our youth group and, have gone to camp with us before, and share it with them so that we can share that experience and this funny thing. But we do all that, and they're not willing to share Jesus sometimes. We're so happy to tell everyone, like we said, about the great thing that just happened to us, or the funny thing we saw, and share the experiences that way. But we don't want to share with them about the ways God's been working in our lives, or the things that God has taught us. The things that maybe in our devotion time, something we learned or that God pointed out to us. Those things we're not very eager to tell. We're so willing to share about ourselves across the internet and all kinds of things. What we ate for lunch that day or something. Okay, and I'm just as guilty as anyone else. But we don't share about Jesus. But we see Andrew, he was so eager, he couldn't wait to go find his brother and tell him about Jesus and say, hey, you got to listen to what I just heard from this Jesus guy. This is great. So we're talking about discipleship. What is discipleship? And that definition we gave at the beginning, what was it again? To help ourselves get more and more like Jesus, making our lives closer to Jesus, trying to figure out how we can be more of who Jesus wants us to be. And that was what we were talking about at first, that they made the choice to listen. They made the choice to follow. They made the choice to commit to him. That is all summed up in that first part. And now we're on to the second part of that definition. The second part was, after you're working on doing it yourself, you're reaching out to try to help others to do the same thing. Try to help other people get closer to Jesus themselves. And that's where we're moving into now. Andrew listened, he followed. Now he's out telling others about Jesus. And he wants them to get close to Jesus as well. Last week we mentioned it. Why are we still here on the earth? Why are you here after you accept Jesus into your life? It's to tell other people about him. That is why we're still here. And if you've gone through some of our discipleship program, that, like we've mentioned, some of this might be a little familiar to you, but think about it this way. How many people can you by yourself reach for Jesus? You can maybe you could do a real good job, and you're one of those people who are really great at sharing your faith and telling people about Jesus all the time. That's great that you can spread that around. But how many people can you actually really spend some time with and really try to help them along in their walk with Jesus as you try to do the same thing? There's not that many people that you can really spend some serious time with and pour into and try to work together as you're both trying to get more and more like Jesus. And you can really probably only do that with, realistically, a small number of people at a time. You know, throughout your life, maybe the number might go up a little bit, but it's not that many people you could really actually go along with and as you're studying the Bible together and encouraging each other and helping each other along and trying to get more and more like Jesus. You can tell lots of people about Jesus, and that's great. But to really pour into people and help them get closer to Jesus, you can't do that many at a time. Jesus himself had 12. Yeah, he taught to thousands of people, and he talked to tons and tons of people while he was here, but he had 12 men that he took aside with him and poured himself into and tried to teach them about what he was there for and the things that he was trying to teach other people. In fact, there's lots of times you look in the Bible where it talks about some lesson that Jesus gives to a big group of people, and then after that group of people leave, he turns to his 12 and it says, okay, now did you understand what I just said? And takes time to go over it again with those 12 people to make sure they knew. There's only a certain amount of people we can really do that with. But if we can take a few people in our life, 2 or 3, 4, 5 people maybe in the course of our life, and really spend some time with, trying to help them to learn more about Jesus. And then what happens? Those people, if they do the same thing, again, not a lot, maybe just a couple people in their lifetime, but if they take those people and it keeps multiplying out and out and out. See, Jesus took those 12 to really pour into them and teach them and make sure they understood what Jesus was trying to do. And those 12 men went out to tell other people. And they did the same thing, and it spread across the world quickly. And so, like I said, maybe you're someone who's really good at sharing your faith. That's awesome. Maybe you've seen someone who's really good at sharing their faith. That's great. We need it. People need to hear the gospel and hear about Jesus, don't they? But take the amount of people that one person can take in a lifetime and how many people they can share the gospel with, and compare it to the amount that can be multiplied on top of one another by spreading it out in the way, the model that Jesus has shown us here. And the numbers can't compare. And so we need to be telling others about it, telling them and saying, hey, come listen to Jesus. Let me help you here. Let's go together and work on getting ourselves closer to Jesus together. So we're going to go back to John one last time here. We'll start again in verse 40. It says, one of the two which heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first findeth his own brother Simon, and saith unto him, we have found the Messiah, which is being interpreted the Christ. And then listen to this part. And he brought him to Jesus. So Andrew didn't just go and tell Peter about Jesus. He went out and he brought him to Jesus. And he ran out to his brother and he said, Simon, you got to listen to this. Listen to this guy. I found the Messiah. I found the guy we're looking for. Come on, let's go find this guy. And he grabbed his brother and took him and said, we got to go find Jesus. He wasn't content just to tell him about it and then say, okay, well, my job's done. I told him about it. Hope he does something with it, and I'm going to go on and move on with the rest of my day. He went out there, he not only told him, he said, hey, come on, we got to go find this guy, and brought his brother to Jesus. And we started to say it and mention a little bit that this Andrew and Peter, these are the same Andrew and Peter that became part of Jesus' 12 disciples, the 12 that we were just talking about. And these are the same two guys. They eventually followed Jesus. And that Peter especially, think about the great things God did through Peter that we can see in the Bible and reaching the world after Jesus went back into heaven to be with God. And think about what if Andrew hadn't actually brought Peter back to Jesus? What if he just went and told him about it, but then, like we said, oh, well, I told him, and, be real great if he chooses to go find him, but I don't know, that's not my job, so I hope he does, right? And sometimes we act that way as well. I told someone, I gave someone a tract or something, or I gave them one of those Baptist breads back there, so my job's done, and hopefully they do something with that. Sometimes we have to do more than that. And we have to actually go out and we have to put a little bit of work and effort in. Now, you can't force people. I'm not telling you to go out on a Sunday morning and kidnap someone and throw them in your car and drive them to church here, okay? So don't go kidnap someone and tell them that I told you to do that. We can't force people to do it. We can't physically pick them up and do it. But if we are serious about fulfilling this second part of the discipleship that we've talked about, the helping others to be like Jesus, then sometimes we have to go past the point of saying, well, I told them about it, so that's all I can do. Sometimes we have to actually take some time and put into them to notice that someone hasn't been here in a few weeks and reaching out to them and try to figure out what's going on. If something's happened, if they've been something they're struggling with. Offering to spend time with them, to talk to them, to pray with them. Man, not just to say, okay, I'll pray for you and then go on your day, but actually taking time to stop and do it. Or taking time to leave your house and go over to their place to spend some time with them. In our prayer request we had this morning, right? We had a couple people who are going through some hard things, some people who have lost loved ones and health problems. And it involves sometimes actually reaching out to them, not on a Sunday when you see them here, but sometime through the week, and seeing if they're okay, seeing if there's something you could do for them, seeing if they need someone to talk to, anything like that. If we're going to be serious about helping people get more and more like Jesus, it takes some work on our part sometimes. Sometimes even we might need to reach out when we see something that they're doing that's not quite right or not what Jesus has called them to do, and we notice it. It might even have to take the difficult step to talk to someone about that when it's appropriate, when it's time. And so there are times where we need to push a little bit, and there's some times where we need to back up a little bit. Jesus even had times where he told his disciples to back off a little bit. But the thing is, we are not going to really know that if we need to be pushing for someone or if we need to back off a little bit, unless we've already done the first part that we've already talked about, unless we've already listened to Jesus, unless we've already committed to him, and we have that relationship built up, and we know and can listen to the Holy Spirit guiding in our life and prompting in our life about how we need to reach out to someone. Because we have to have that first part done. We can't be going out and telling someone else, you need to be more like Jesus, when we're going the opposite way from Jesus. We have to make sure that we're following Jesus in our life as well. Think about someone you know well, someone you have a good relationship with, and how did you cultivate that relationship? You spend time with them, don't you? Talk to them, you get to know them. How much of a relationship are you going to have with someone if you only spend 1 hour on a Sunday with them, and that's it? And then you go away and you don't talk to them again for the rest of your week until the next Sunday. But see, that's what we're doing with God sometimes. We come here and we spend 1 hour with him here, but the rest of our week, we're running as far away from him as we can. What kind of a relationship are we going to have with God if we do that? What kind of a relationship would you have with someone else, a friend or a family member, if that's how you treated them? And so if we're going to be helping other people try to get closer to Jesus and trying to do our part and reaching out like we're talking about here and bringing them to Jesus, we have to make sure we have that first part done too, that we're committed to following him and we're going with him. The discipleship program that we use at our church has 14 lessons that you go through. But really, that's not the end of it. Again, that's just the model that we use. But what Jesus has showed us here is this goes continues on and on. It's not just 14 lessons and I'm done. I don't have to work with that person anymore. It continues going. We're continuing to work together to get towards Jesus. So right now you might be sitting there and thinking, well, this sounds like a lot of work. Well, it is. You're right. It is a lot of work. But the Bible doesn't tell us that following Jesus is going to be easy. And in fact, Jesus said, the world hates me, and so if you follow me, Jesus, then the world is going to hate you at times too. And again, in Matthew and Luke, both places, Jesus says that the path to Jesus is straight and narrow, and it's difficult sometimes. And the path to destruction, the path away from Jesus, is wide and easy and inviting and wants people to go down that way. That it's going to be hard sometimes. It's going to be some work sometimes. And we look at things like this and look at the Christian life and we think about, wow, man, that's hard. Why would Jesus want me to do that? Why is he calling me to do this? Why is he telling me I have to put this work in? Why can't it be easier? The problem is that we look at it and we want to do it our way. And when we look at it the way that God has set it up for us, it makes things so much easier. For one, Jesus said, hey, I'm going to be right there with you and help you along with this. Again, like we said, Jesus is always here, and he's waiting for us to come towards him, to commit to him and follow him. And when we do that, he says, I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to help you through this. I'm going to go right through you, go through the difficult times with you when there's problems. I'm not going to leave you. But also, he gave us this example, this discipleship example. And he's telling us, don't do it alone. So often we try to do it by ourselves. We try to do it alone. And what Jesus is telling us right here is don't do it alone. Grab someone with you and bring them along with you in this path, down that narrow path. To look around you. Look, as you're moving towards Jesus, as you're trying to get closer and closer to Jesus, look on either side of you and see who's there with you trying to get closer to Jesus also, and grab hold of them, and let's all run to Jesus together. That is the example and the way that God has set it up for us. That we can all do this together. And it reminded me of the Wizard of Oz. Hey, Dorothy and the Tin Man and all that. What do? They put their arms out and they put their arms together and they go skipping on down the yellow brick road, right? And so we need to be, as we're going towards Jesus and we're trying to get closer and closer to Jesus in our life, and we look around and see who else is trying to get closer to Jesus, put your arms out, lock your arms together just like Dorothy, and go skipping down the road to Jesus together. Bring people along with you to make it easier, to bear one another's burdens, the Bible tells us, to help each other out. So that as things get difficult in life, because things will get difficult in life sometimes, and when one person starts lagging behind, the rest of you are there to grab hold of them and say, come on, we got to keep going. Don't stop. Don't fall behind. And when you start to fall behind, because it happens to all of us, that there's someone else there to grab hold of you and drag you forward too. Say, don't stop. Don't get left behind. We're all going together. God sets it up in perfect ways so that if we get messed up because we try to do it our way and we try to see it from our perspective, and we need to look at it from God's perspective and look at it the way that God has set it up, that he's telling us, yeah, it'll be hard sometimes, it'll be work sometimes and effort, but if you do it my way, it makes it easier to grab other people along with you and take other people with you and all move towards Jesus together. That as you try to get more and more like Jesus in your life, that you're grabbing the people that are around you and say, come on, we're all going to become more like Jesus together. That's why God has set us up with this church here. That's why God has given us relationships in here, to look at someone who's going towards Jesus and to grab them and say, come on, let's do this together. Let's get through these difficult times together. Let's not leave one another behind. And so we're going to close with the verse that we use as our theme for our discipleship program. It comes from 2 Timothy 2:2. It It says, "And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also." As you're going through your life, as you're trying to follow Jesus and follow after him and get closer to him, take the things that you learn about Jesus, teach it to someone else so that they can do the same thing also. Take it or turn around and tell it to someone else and someone else and someone else. And we can all be moving towards Jesus. God, we come to you and we just thank you for the day. We thank you for bringing us here. We thank you for